You're at a networking event or, maybe a dinner party. The person across from you finishes a sentence.
Yeah.
It's your turn to speak. You have the perfect response right there in your head. So you open your mouth and suddenly your brain completely unplugs. You just freeze.
Yeah, and the silence stretches out and gets incredibly awkward.
Exactly. And most people sitting in that agonizing silence think they're freezing because they simply don't know enough English vocabulary. But you're actually struggling with something completely different.
Welcome back to English Unfiltered.
Our mission today for this deep dive is to explore the hidden psychology and the actual cognitive mechanics of why the traditional way you've been taught to learn vocabulary is secretly sabotaging your fluency.
Right, because we are pulling from a really fascinating stack of research today that completely flips the script on language acquisition.
It totally does.
And we should probably start by dropping a rather counterintuitive finding right from the data. Fluent speakers do not necessarily know dramatically more words than intermediate learners.
Wait, really? Not dramatically more?
No, not at all. In fact, trying to memorize more words is likely the very mechanism causing you to freeze up in the first place.
Okay, my mind is a little blown right now.
I know, but that becomes incredibly important later when we look at how the brain actually retrieves information under pressure.
That feels like a massive contradiction, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we're conditioned to believe that fluency is just a numbers game. You hit 10,000 words and boom, suddenly you're eloquent.
Right, the classic myth.
And I guarantee you, if you are listening to this right now, you have been in that exact social situation I just described. You are sitting there, the conversation moves past you, and your immediate crushing thought is, I don't know enough words. My vocabulary is just too small.
Which leads directly into what we call the false assumption framework. Let's break down what people believe, why they believe it, and what is actually happening in your head. When that freeze happens, the assumption is always, well, a lack of inventory.
Yeah, so what is the immediate behavioral response? You go back to your desk, you download a new app, you write down 40 new words on a Sunday night, and you just start memorizing.
You create list after list. You spend hours flipping digital flashcards, and, for a few days, it feels incredibly productive.
Oh yeah, you get that dopamine hit from the app telling you that your streak is alive. You really think you are actively fixing the problem.
But months later, you find yourself in another conversation, the exact same pressure applies, and you freeze again.
It's the worst feeling.
It creates a devastating cycle of frustration because it feels like a personal intellectual failure. But the research we are looking at today reveals a massive psychological relief. The problem was never missing vocabulary.
It wasn't the size of the vocabulary at all.
Exactly. The real bottleneck isn't vocabulary size, it's vocabulary accessibility. The difference between the intermediate learner and the fluent speaker is access, not storage.
So if the problem is access, my instinct is to push back on that slightly. If I am in a conversation making eye contact and I literally cannot find the word I need, how is access the problem? I mean, isn't an empty warehouse still empty? I feel like I just don't own the words to begin with.
Well, you are assuming the warehouse is empty because you can't see the boxes.
Yeah.
But you have the inventory. The issue is that the doors to that specific aisle are just locked and the lights are completely off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, learning a new word through a flashcard or a vocabulary list just tosses a box into the dark corner of that warehouse. That is storage.
Right.
But utilizing that word, giving it context and emotional weight, that is what paves the pathway to the box and turns the lights on. That is retrieval.
This perfectly explains a micro story that happens constantly in the corporate world. Think about prepping for a high-stakes meeting. You sit down the night before, you study all these advanced industry terms, you prepare this really sophisticated, persuasive vocabulary.
Right.
You know all the jargon, and you feel ready.
But the preparation gives you a false sense of security.
Completely. Because the meeting starts, the pressure is suddenly on, all eyes are on you. And in the heat of that moment, those impressive terms you just studied just vanish. They're completely locked in that dark warehouse.
Yep, they're inaccessible.
So you end up defaulting to the clunkiest, most basic words possible. Like you wanted to say, leverage our synergistic bandwidth. And you end up saying, use our good time. You sound like a completely different, less competent version of yourself.
Then the immediate aftermath is always self-flagellation. You walk out of the room and think, why didn't I use that word? I knew that word.
I knew that word, yes. That is the universal phrase of frustration.
And that specific phrase is the proof of the data. You did know the word. The storage was there, but the retrieval pathway wasn't. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the actual mechanics of the human brain.
Because it doesn't work like a textbook.
It absolutely does not function the way traditional language classes pretend it does. Your brain is not a dictionary.
Right, it doesn't store things alphabetically or by definition.
Not at all. When you are looking for a word mid-sentence, your brain isn't running a linear search algorithm. It searches through a highly complex web of connections.
We'll call the connections.
It looks for context, emotion, physical experience, sounds, images, even the memory of previous conversations. The richer and more intertwined that network of connections is, the faster the retrieval becomes.
Let's dig into the how of that mechanism. Because if I just stare at a word on a black and white flashcard, I am giving my brain almost zero connections. There's no physical movement, no emotional stake, no social context. It's just a sterile, isolated data point.
And that sterile data point is incredibly fragile. Compare that to living a word while you are physically laughing with a friend or while you are incredibly frustrated trying to fix a flat tire.
The brain captures all of that.
Exactly. Your brain encodes the ambient temperature, the social pressure, the auditory tone, and the emotional spike alongside the vocabulary word. That creates multiple neural pathways to the exact same piece of information.
Which brings us to a crucial distinction in the source material that really shifts the paradigm. Passive vocabulary versus active vocabulary. This seems to be where the majority of dedicated learners get hopelessly trapped.
Oh, it is the ultimate trap. Passive vocabulary consists of the words you recognize but cannot spontaneously produce. Active vocabulary is the much, much smaller subset of words you can deploy instantly under pressure.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to see if the mechanism translates.
Yeah.
Passive vocabulary feels like recognizing a celebrity on the street. You see them, you know exactly who they are, you could list their last 5 movies.
Right.
But you can't just walk up and suddenly have a deep, intimate conversation with them. You don't actually know them like that. There is no real relationship.
That's perfect. You have data about them, but you don't have a dynamic connection.
But active vocabulary is like your best friend on speed dial. They are available within seconds. There is no mental search, no hesitation, no awkwardness. You just connect and communicate immediately.
The tragic part of language learning is that passive vocabulary is always exponentially larger than active vocabulary. These are the intricate words you recognize perfectly while reading a dense news article, the phrases you understand completely while listening to a podcast or watching a movie.
But they are the exact same words that evaporate the second you try to speak.
Because speaking requires spontaneous recall, while reading merely requires recognition. And here's a truth that is going to severely interrupt the comfort zone of a lot of learners out there.
Brace yourselves.
Recognizing thousands of words creates an illusion. Because you recognize them on an app, it feels like progress. Recognition feels like learning. But recognition is not fluency.
Man, that is a harsh reality. Recognition feels like learning, but recognition isn't fluency. So when you get that hit of dopamine for passing a multiple choice vocabulary quiz, you are actually receiving a false positive for your conversational ability.
It is a complete false positive. Recognizing a word on a screen requires almost none of the neural network we just discussed. Recalling a word mid-sentence while maintaining eye contact, reading the other person's body language, and managing the social pressure of a live conversation.
That's a totally different ballgame.
Entirely. That depends entirely on robust, well-worn retrieval pathways. Fluency is an output mechanism, not an input metric.
Which brings us back to that massive open loop from the beginning of our deep dive. The paradox. We stated earlier that learning more words can actually slow you down and cause you to freeze. When I first read that in the sources, my immediate reaction was to completely reject it.
It goes against everything we're taught.
Right. How can knowing more information make you a slower communicator?
Well, if we look at the brain's network through the lens of cognitive load, the mechanism becomes obvious. Imagine you are continuously adding new words to your storage without ever strengthening the pathways to access them. What you are actually doing is increasing your brain's search complexity.
So if the problem is the search complexity, my instinct is to say we are basically creating a mental traffic jam.
A massive gridlocked traffic jam.
Oh my God. So all those late nights memorizing lists of synonyms, they aren't giving me more conversational options. They're just putting more cars on the road. But I haven't built any new highways to accommodate them.
Exactly.
If I know 5 different nuanced ways to say happy, my brain suddenly have to evaluate all these competing alternatives in a fraction of a second. It panics, the cognitive load maxes out, and I freeze.
You've introduced choice paralysis into your own vocabulary. Instead of becoming faster and more fluid, you actually become slower the more vocabulary you try to cram into your head. You are literally clogging your own cognitive machinery with unused inventory.
Wow.
The source material distills this beautifully into one core principle. Depth creates fluency, breadth creates collections.
Depth creates fluency. Breadth creates collections. That completely redefines the goal. Are you trying to be an active, dynamic communicator, or are you just a collector of English words?
And collecting is safe.
Right. It feels productive without requiring any social risk. It's predictable.
Collecting protects your ego. You can sit in your room and collect words without ever facing the fear of being misunderstood or sounding foolish. But collecting absolutely abandons you when you are staring at someone waiting for an answer.
So if the root of the problem is this traffic jam, this overwhelming search complexity, we really need to figure out how to clear the gridlock. If the data suggests we should stop adding cars, does the research provide a practical way to build the highways? I want to make sure we offer a tangible strategy here. How do we transition from breadth to depth?
The strategy requires a fundamental mindset shift regarding what practice actually looks like. Instead of trying to acquire 100 new words this week, which remember only adds to the traffic jam, you need to take 20 words you already somewhat know, and you need to drive them deep.
Okay, so you take the familiar inventory and you intentionally construct the retrieval pathways. But how does a listener actually do that alone in their living room? What is the physical mechanism of driving a word deep?
You have to simulate the web of connections. You take those same 20 words and you force yourself to use them in vastly different contexts. You speak them out loud using different emotional tones.
That was acting.
A little bit, yeah. You use them to tell a story about your past, and then you use them to explain a complex problem. You ask hypothetical questions with them, and you debate an imaginary opponent with them. You are artificially attaching context, emotion, and vocalization to the word.
Let's apply this to that corporate meeting scenario from earlier, the one where the pressure causes you to forget all the fancy jargon. Instead of memorizing 50 new, highly specific business terms for that presentation, the better strategy is to take 10 simple, familiar words.
Yes.
And the practice isn't staring at them on a page. The practice is standing in your kitchen, describing your entire project update out loud using only those 10 words.
You constrain your vocabulary to force your brain to get creative with the retrieval pathways.
You might practice telling the project update as a frustrating story, then retell it as an exciting victory. You are mapping those familiar words to different emotional states so that when the pressure of the boardroom hits, the pathway is just wide open.
Furthermore, you practice the art of paraphrasing. If a specific, complex term escapes you mid-sentence, you don't freeze.
You don't just stop talking.
No, because you have practiced describing objects and concepts using your active 20-word vocabulary. You simply talk around the missing word. The fundamental rule here is speak before translating.
Let's pause and isolate that. Speak before translating. What is the actual danger of the translation phase?
Okay, so most learners had a conversational gap, pause, search their native language dictionary in their head, find the exact parallel translation in English, and then speak. Every time you do that, you are reinforcing the translation pathway.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. You're training your brain that English can only be accessed through your native language. That is not a fluency pathway. That is a detour.
It's a crutch that basically becomes a permanent roadblock.
When you practice paraphrasing, using only the familiar English words you already have active access to, you are strengthening direct, native to English retrieval pathways. You bypass the internal dictionary entirely.
You stop treating English like a math equation to be solved, and you start actually living inside that web of connections.
You turn those 20 words from a passive, dusty collection into an active, high-speed neural network. You move them permanently from storage to access.
Think about the massive psychological relief this offers. The sheer amount of pressure this takes off your shoulders is incredible. Your goal isn't knowing more.
Not at all.
You don't have to spend your weekend agonizing over a massive vocabulary list, feeling like you're constantly falling behind. Your goal is simply accessing what you already have better. Stop collecting. Start retrieving.
It completely dismantles the traditional educational model. Practice is no longer about input. It is entirely about output and manipulation.
So, to the listener, the next time you freeze in a conversation, and let's be honest, it will happen again because the brain is imperfect and we are all human, the critical takeaway is to stop judging your intelligence. Stop assuming your English is broken.
It really isn't.
It is absolutely not a failure of your intellect or your potential. It is merely a mechanical retrieval issue. The box is sitting right there in the warehouse. You just haven't paved the road to it yet.
This does raise one final, incredibly provocative thought from the research, though. Something that ventures beyond just language mechanics and bleeds into actual psychology.
Wait, where does the data point next?
Well, we've mapped out the cognitive mechanics, we've established the traffic jams and the retrieval pathways. But the most profound element of the source material explores what happens to your actual personality when you finally force yourself to speak before translating.
Your personality shifts.
Drastically. When you finally stop translating, when you abandon the exhausting search for the perfect collected word and instead rely on deep, active, immediate retrieval, the psychological shift of bypassing that translation phase changes who you are in that moment.
Because you aren't allocating all your mental RAM to playing human dictionary anymore.
Precisely. When you translate, you are a student taking a live exam. Your tone is flat, your face is concentrated, your timing is delayed.
You're just crunching numbers.
Right. But when you bypass that and use direct retrieval, you become a communicator. Your natural sense of humor emerges because your comedic timing isn't ruined by a 3-second lag.
That makes so much sense.
Your empathy translates because you can focus on the other person's eyes instead of staring at the ceiling while you search for a word. Your entire posture and confidence change.
It's as if the mental gridlock was actually suppressing your true character. You unlock a completely unfiltered version of yourself.
Fluency isn't just about vocal speed, it's a fundamental identity shift in a new cultural context. But honestly, the intricacies of how English alters your social identity, that is a completely different conversation.
It really is, but man, what a powerful open loop to leave on. Remember the core framework today. Depth over breadth. You likely already possess the vocabulary you need to be fascinating, funny, and persuasive. Now you just have to go build the roads to find those words.
Until next time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you in the next one.